Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Rabbi Weinstein. Ow! Ooh! It's the noise. We live in such a noisy era, arguably the noisiest era of all time. Now, typically, if you would ask someone, why is it such a noisy era? We would say because, we have the iPhone now, we have computers, we can, at any moment someone can call you, someone can email you, someone can text you, someone can disturb your life at any given moment. There are people who, for many years, even before the most modern technology, we had television, right? People have television running in their kitchen constantly while they're having dinner with their family. People keep telephones in their bedrooms so that you get a call at any moment and you can answer it. But actually, all of this creates a very noisy environment. And what does noise do? Noise creates distraction. That's what it does. Whenever we have something which is noisy, it creates distraction. You're in a room where there's a lot of noise, someone's teaching like I am, and there's a lot of noise, it's a distraction. It's very hard to teach. And when you have distraction, what does distraction lead to? Distraction leads to confusion. And so we end up living a very confused life. Actually, we don't even need to get to all of the examples I just explained to describe the noise that we have in our lives. Anything that we must do can also be a part of the noise of our life. It is the noise, if it's creating confusion, if it's not joined together with every aspect of our life, it creates distraction and it creates confusion. And we end up having the necessities of our life, actually itself also creating noise in our life. And so when there are many different things going on, and every single person's life, especially as we get older, typically gets busier and busier, and we have more things going on in our life and more elements in it, we end up having more noise. And the more noise we have, the more distraction we have, the more distraction, the more confusion. And who wants to live a life of confusion? So I want to begin by asking every single one of you to turn to the person sitting next to you and to share two distractions that you have in your life. Okay? Turn to the person sitting next to you and just share any two distractions. It makes no difference what it is. And can anyone share an example of a distraction that you shared? Yes. Your phone. Excellent. Okay. Can we all relate to that? The new technology phones? Yes. Okay. Any other example? This woman said that what the noise she has in her life is herself, the confusion that she has in herself about, what, how, when, where, all of those things, right? Which I think, can we relate to that? We can relate to that, right? So this isn't modern. This has been since the beginning of mankind that we've had that type of a distraction. One other? Worries. Excellent. Something that's part of being human. We worry about things. Money is a distraction. Excellent. Making it. Yes, and getting it. Sometimes even having it can be a distraction. But here's the thing. Actually, eating can be a distraction in our life, right? Because sometimes you may be able to relate to this. Maybe not. I'm guessing you can. Sometimes we want to eat certain things which are actually create a very big distraction to our life because they're unhealthy for us. They create, they make our body start functioning in ways which we'd rather it wouldn't be functioning, etc., etc. Sleep can be a distraction, right? Look at your local teenager, right, who sleeps 10, 12 hours a day and literally kills time. Television. Right? Television. So what I'm talking about is even our very bodily functions can be distractions in our life. And in fact, we find the concept of noise not only on a decibel level, but we also find there's a concept of noise in pictures. Right? As you can see, this is actually a very noisy picture. As a photographer would refer to it. Why? Because it's not clear. It has distraction in it. Now, what's amazing, which we'll discuss in a minute, is that the greatness of artists is that they have turned this into art. They will actually inject distraction into pictures to create a different form of art as opposed to a very clear picture. Now, while in art that works very well in our lives, we're going to discuss how we also think we're artistic by making our lives noisy, but actually what we're doing is creating a lot of distress for ourselves. Because it's never good to have noise. We actually, what we do in our lives is we become addicted to noise. We are actually dependent on noise. That's the reason why people have televisions running in their kitchen while they're cooking and while they're eating. They need to have it. People have radios running, or maybe not anymore, but more so maybe 30, 40 years ago, the radio was always on and running. You go into your car, you need to have something on. You can't just drive in silence. You know, what is the most, in a prison, right? If they want to punish someone, right, what do? They put someone in solitary confinement. Now, solitary confinement is the worst punishment. Now, we can understand, you're alone, you're in solitude. But there is an element, a psychological element to it, which is part of the reason why it's such a severe punishment. One of the last things human beings want to experience is being alone. Now, I do have a few friends that like being alone because they like talking with intelligent people, and this way they have a great conversation. But generally, people hate being alone. I remember when I was in camp, so they used to, if they needed to punish a kid, what would they do? They had a big circle in the middle of the field, and the boy had to stand in the circle for 10 minutes. He couldn't come out of the circle. Well, what's so bad about that? What's bad about it is when you have to be there all alone, there's only one thing to focus on when you're in solitary confinement. What is that? Yourself. That means you have to really get in touch with yourself. That actually is, whether we realize it or not, most often a very frightening idea, to get deeply in touch with myself. Not to have anything distracting me. Nothing on the walls, bare room, just me. And that's because we have become addicted to noise. We have become addicted to distraction. Anything to take us away. If you have the habit, as I often do, to constantly check my email, what can possibly be coming in right now that's so urgent at this very moment? And the answer is nothing. But I'm constantly looking for a distraction from experiencing the moment. And that's the noise that we're talking about, and that's the noise we want to get to. And we're going to see how the very fundamentals of Judaism actually have given us a gift to resolve this issue, how we turn our backs on the gift, and how we can actually reclaim it. And this is really a fundamental, basic idea right at the beginning of the Code of Jewish Law, at the fundamentals of Hasidic philosophy. And hopefully by the end of this discussion, we're going to have a handle on this. You ever see a young couple dating? Right? So where do you go out on a date? So you're 25 years old, you're dating a 23-year-old, whatever it is, or you're both 25, you're going out on a date. Where do you go? Well, let's go to an amusement park. Right? We're going to get to know each other. We're going to go to an amusement park. I'm going to learn how she reacts on the roller coaster. Right? Or let's go to a movie where we can both stare at the screen, right? And get to know each other very well. Even our dating, of getting to know each other, is in environments that have the greatest distractions, and we're specifically looking for a distraction. How many people say, let's go on a date, let's sit down in a hotel lobby and just talk? What a brilliant idea. Maybe we actually will get to know each other. And we won't have distraction. I'm just trying to bring out how our society is, and human beings in general, have become so dependent on distraction. So what we need to learn to do is to turn all of our distractions into music. That's not an easy thing to do, but it's something that Judaism demands of us. In order for us to be able to live a fulfilled Jewish life, we have to be able to take all of the noise and bring it together into music. And I would say not just music, but into a symphony. Because a symphony in particular has the lessons that we want to learn about how to turn our noise into music. Because a symphony is a harmony. It's many different things, but they're all coming together. And what happens when someone experiences a symphony? If you enjoy music, or if you've learned to appreciate music, music generally gives a person a much deeper experience of whatever it is that they're experiencing. Even if it's sadness, if you listen to a sad piece of music, it gives tremendous depth and meaning to the sadness that you're experiencing. So when we turn our lives into music, actually what we're experiencing is a much more meaningful life. Symphonies are harmonies. I want to show you a little piece of a symphony, and I want you to pay attention to all of the elements that are going on in this 1-minute clip. The conductor, the players, how they look at their sheet music, how they look at the conductor, how each one's playing a different instrument, the focus, how every person is really, the conductor is not pointing to anyone in particular, but sort of guiding different segments of the orchestra at different times. Let's watch this for a minute so we can appreciate what a symphony is. So imagine if your life was like that. You know how much energy was there? It was unbelievable. The amount of energy was just unbelievable. And everything, every single element was working together precisely. This is actually how our lives are expected to be, or for us to actually develop it to a point that it's like that. And imagine if you woke up in the morning with that energy and just dancing your way through the day. Despite all of the things going on, and the challenges and the pressures, when they're all working together, it's an entirely different picture. So this is what we want to get to by the end of today's discussion. So I want to discuss 3 points with you. Point number 1 is world of tohu, world of tikkun. Anyone ever hear of tohu and tikkun? Raise your hand. Okay. We're going to discuss tohu, and we'll get a little Kabbalistic and a little bit deep, but hopefully we'll stick it out together. Then we're going to discuss the fear of losing yourself. We are terrified of losing ourselves. And we're going to discuss that because you need to be able to lose yourself in order to be able to be true to your authentic self. And in this way, you let go and you're able to create music. And the last point is the solution, which is symphony. Actually, little typo over here. In my reconstruction of the lesson, we're going to be doing the solution of symphony and then the fear of losing self. Okay, so let's begin with understanding tohu and tikkun. Okay, tohu and tikkun is a Kabbalistic teaching, but actually is expressed right at the beginning of the Torah, where the Torah tells us when God created the world, He created a world of tohu. Tohu in English would be a world of confusion. So you see, here's the thing. When God teaches us from the very beginning of creation that our mission is to turn our noise, our confusion, into music, we have to rectify the confusion of the world. Now, this is actually our purpose. And that's the reason why I want to show you the model of how God created the world, because in this way God modeled for us a prototype of how we have to go through life. It's difficult, but this actually is our purpose, and I think everyone in this room is of the age to know that life is not an easy ride. So we can either let it be difficult to us, or we can take on the challenge of its difficulties and actually produce something with it. You see, the world is constructed of primarily 2 things. The world is constructed of energy and receptacles. Let me give you an example. Every human being is made up of a body and a soul. The soul is the energy, the body is the receptacle. That is the construction of all matter in the universe. You have the body of everything, you have the soul of everything. You have the energy of everything, you have the receptacle. You have matter, you have spirit. That is how everything is constructed. If something doesn't have the Spirit of God in it, the energy of God, even in the most minute form, it cannot exist. If the energy of God does not have a receptacle to come into, it has no form of expression in our reality. Okay? Now, let me use an example. When we want to understand God, or godly matters, then typically what we do is we learn it from ourselves. You see, there's a reason why God made us in the image of God. Because he said, well, how is a human being going to understand the infinite God? So he said, look in yourself. Look in yourself, you'll understand God. So let's look at people for a second, okay? You ever meet someone who's scattered? Scattered. They're just all over the place. You know, nothing personal to anyone who may be an artist. I consider my work to be a little bit artistic. But, you know, artists are known. It's a stigma. I don't know if it's true, but it's a stigma that they have that they are, you know, sometimes scattered. Okay? Now, whether it's true or not is not relevant. The point I'm trying to bring out is, though, that artists are actually very uniquely gifted people, right? They have a very powerful energy. But even though someone, and we are all probably artists in our own different ways, if someone has a very powerful and unique energy, but if that powerful, unique energy, it cannot be directed in a healthy manner, what ends up happening is you have a person who's scattered, who is all over the place. And that's very unsettling, right? What else do you have? In the contrast, you have people who are settled. They are, we'll say, a little bit more stable in the sense that they're not scattered. They're very settled people. Their energy is not flying all over the place, but they are actually focused and settled people. Can we relate to those two types of people? Okay. So this is actually an example of exactly what we are talking about when we talk about the world of confusion and the world of rectification. Okay? You know, when websites are created, so very often a website will be created in a beta form. Familiar with that? So beta form is like their round one testing ground, and then when the beta form, all of the quirks in it are fixed up and touched up, and it's working perfectly. Suddenly, you go live with the official version. So, or it's like version 1.1, version 1.2. This is actually the way God created the world. Now you know why our websites go through this process, because humans are in the image of God. And we just follow that process. God created version 1.1, which is the world of confusion. High energy, but everything ended up scattering, which I'm going to explain. So when you have energy that cannot be channeled, you have it scattered all over the place. It's not very effective. And what's the interesting irony of this, everyone? The interesting irony of this is that the scattered person always marries the settled person. And the settled person always marries the scattered person. And that's what keeps marriage counselors in business. But there's a reason why God brings the two together, because both of them have an advantage the other one doesn't have. And together, if they can complement each other, which is the intention of a marriage, you suddenly have an extremely powerful force. So when God created the world, He created true prototypes. Prototype number one was the world of confusion. And that's what we have right up here on the screen. The haaretz, and the earth, haita, was tohu vavohu, was void and confusion. Everything was scattered. What does this mean? What this means is when God first created the world and He sent energy into the world, He sent very strong, intense energy into the world. But when they came to be received in their receptacle, the energy was way too intense for the receptacle to contain. Because it was so focused on, and so narrow and so intense. So what ends up happening is it creates confusion. It can't find a place to settle, and the vessel shatters. And when the vessel shatters, the light just goes all over the place. It becomes scattered. That's what happens. If you plug this bulb into a 220 volt outlet, you have exactly what you just heard. You have a fire starting and the vessel shatters. It cannot contain the energy. The energy is just too powerful. Here would be another example of an overdose of power, right? And what you end up having is a collapse because the receptacles that are supposed to be holding the energy can no longer contain the energy. That's what happens. So what ends up happening is you have light scattered all over the place. You have pieces of shattered vessel all over the place. And you have nothing contained and nothing focused. So now here's another interesting thing about intense energy. If you know someone who's very intense, they are very hard to work with because they are so persistent. They're so intense, they're so persistent about their energy. This energy in prototype number 1 was so strong it wouldn't work with any other types of energy. There are many different types of energy or defined energies that God sends into the world, and everything has to work in harmony. We have to create a symphony. And it doesn't work when things are so powerfully intense. So you have this great positive of this enormously intense power, this enormously intense energy, but the problem is it becomes scattered and unsettled. So there's an advantage, but a huge disadvantage because at the end of the day it's not productive. And so then what did God do? God said, we're going to have to create a second version of the world, which we're going to discuss in a minute. The two issues with this world of tohu, this world of confusion, are that it's too intense and it's unyielding to others. It's unyielding to others. It will not work with other people. These are the two problems with tohu. What is the benefit of tohu? Intense, powerful energy. You have something that's really, really powerful, but boy, we need to find a way to contain it or to work with it because it's too overwhelming. So what ends up happening is that you have chaos and you have an endless discordant energy. So God was left with a world with shattered vessels and a light that was basically remained aloof. It remained an encompassing light instead of penetrating the world because it was too intense to actually penetrate the world. And so God ended up without a world. That's actually what happened. So what ends up happening is you can't create a merger. Here would be maybe an example that we can look at. This is chaos. Chaos is a bunch of rays of light, each one working on their own very intensely. Rectification, the world of rectification is when all of the light is coming from the same place or coming to the same place. It's all working in tandem. Everything is working together. Any questions? Any objections? Move on. Okay. So here's an example. So if I want to balance this on my hand, I probably will not be able to. And the reason why I can't balance this on my hand is because it has a single point, right? And therefore, it topples over very easily. Whereas if you have something that has some balance, like a chair that has 4 legs, it stands on its own very nicely. There is stability. There's stability because it actually has 4 legs. It has balance. When you have an intense light that's unyielding to others, it doesn't have balance in its life. Okay? Let's think as an example of... Let's think as an example of, do you remember, how many of you have heard of this gentleman who decided that he's going to tightrope across the Niagara Falls? I mean, I thought that was such a brilliant idea. I mean, I know, maybe we know some people who we would, but I'm not trying that, right? But here's one thing that you can learn from a tightrope walker. A tightrope walker, you always know one thing. He didn't just go across empty-handed. What was he holding in his hand? He was holding a pole. Why was he holding a pole? A balancing pole. Because he knows if he's not in balance, he's going to fall. Now, there are tightrope walkers that walk without poles, but it's a much more risky walk because you don't really have anything to balance you. You must have the right and the left at least to create balance. When you have intense energy, what you have is a tightrope walker without the balancing pole. So you have what we can say is high energy, low sustainability, disaster. That's what it is. Go to visit India if you want to have an understanding of what it means to have high energy, low sustainability. You have billions of people or millions of people without energy. That's what ends up happening because the system ends up collapsing. So here's what I would like you to do. Okay, I would like you to turn to the person next to you And I'm sorry, but part of being in my lessons is that I disturb you. So, but if you don't disturb yourself, by the way, and maybe we'll get to this point, disturbance actually creates growth. No disturbance, no growth. Anything that grows always is disturbed. So disturb yourself now, please. And turn to the person sitting next to you and come up with at least one example of energy that is too overwhelming to contain. I want you to give me an analogy. This is what I do for a living, and I'm making you do it now. I want you to come up with an example of tohu, where you have too much energy for the vessel to contain. It can be in any facet of life. Any example of it. Give me a metaphor of this point. Can anyone give me, do you have an example that you wanted to share?
Lightning.
What's that? Lightning. Excellent. Lightning is perfect. Lightning is an expression of energy, but it actually doesn't really have anything that's containing it. Excellent. So we understand what tohu means. Tohu means where there's an intense energy that's too great for the vessel to actually contain, and what it ends up doing is it ends up destroying, breaking down the vessel. Here, let me show you some other examples. Take your 110 volt appliance and plug it into a 220 volt outlet. When you go to Israel, just plug in your phone or whatever in a regular outlet, and you'll find out what this idea means. That means too much energy in a vessel that cannot contain that much energy. Another example is any explosion. This is what bombs are, right? Bombs are, or dynamite is all about. This is about creating enormous amount of energy in a small container so it creates an explosion. Its entire point. Stuttering from a loss of words. Sometimes you're asked a question and you're sort of overwhelmed. All of a sudden you start stuttering because your words, your vessels actually cannot contain all of the energy that has been created, provoked by the question. One last example. A minister without portfolio. Israel loves this because they have to always, make a few other people feel important. Okay, you'll be a minister too, but we just don't have a portfolio for you. So no one knows what you're doing, but you're a minister. You're right? You have like this high status, but you have no way of really specific way of expressing it. So these are all examples of tohu. So I think we really understand what this is. So it's so strong that actually it becomes destructive. It's so brilliant, it's not understood. It's an influence that has no particular form of expression. Now, actually, this is what evil is. This is actually what evil is. When we have evil overtakes us, and when I say evil, I mean negativity. Okay, any negative things. When negative things overtake us, what's happening? Like maybe last night you were here at midnight. After the comedian, right? And at midnight, it's like very smart to, just eat 3 waffles and a ton of ice cream. It's just what your body needed after the whole, the whole thing, right? What happens actually is evil is a very strong and unstable energy. And evil wants to destabilize us. So it creates a single-dimensional force of saying, go for it. This is great. This is phenomenal. Don't think about anything else. You're totally unbalanced. You totally forget the perspective of your health or anything else that you should be thinking about, or tomorrow morning and what your stomach's going to feel like. And all you think of is how good this ice cream is. This is actually what evil is all about. It's single-dimensional. You don't have a balancing pole. You're unstable. And the energy overtakes you and probably destroys you, definitely destroys you a little bit spiritually. If it's in the physical sense, it's physically, whatever it may be. It makes us very vulnerable. When you're vulnerable, when you're not stable. When you're stable, when you're not stable, when you have confusion, very strong energy without the ability to have a clear picture of what's going on. Now, let's go to the world of tikkun, the world of rectification. This is really what we need to learn about. The world of rectification is lower energy, higher sustainability. Let's cut back on the energy a little bit. Let's create a stronger vessel. And this way, the energy coming into the vessel can actually contain itself. And it can actually be something which is very powerful. This is a reality where someone is carrying a balance pole. I have energy. I have my vessel. Everything is working in tandem. Everything is working together. It can sustain it. And we can develop it. Now, here's a very powerful thing. What happens when we have the world of rectification. When we create an environment where we have lower energy but higher sustainability, is that as the vessel contains the energy, the vessel actually develops the ability to absorb higher and higher levels of energy. With time, it develops itself. And as it develops itself, it can suddenly start to house even light from the world of confusion, the intense light. So when we lead a stable, godly life, we end up discovering intense power and the gift of the energy of Tohu. And we start to become more and more powerful people. So when we have a stable life, where we have many, many different elements in our life, but all of them are working in a certain unified direction, we create rectification. We take the chaos and we start creating harmony. So saying, you know what, give me a little bit of all of these lights and let's put them all together. And we move forward that way. Suddenly, we are rectifying the chaos. And suddenly, we begin to be able to absorb higher and higher levels of energy until we actually rectify the very original issue of this high intense energy, which is now lost. The high intense energy has nowhere to come in and no home to find for itself because it's too intense. But as we cultivate the world, and we fix that which was broken, we suddenly find ourselves being able to absorb this encompassing light, which is encompassing because it's too strong to be a penetrating light into the universe. That makes sense? Let me tell you one example, okay? Or one story. And then I'll take your question. This is one of my favorite stories. This is just a phenomenal story. And it just hit me this morning in actually how it fits right into this discussion. So Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, who's a world-renowned scholar and a Chabad rabbi in Jerusalem, who you may know has written many books, and the first one to start translating the Talmud. And he once, he's a very intelligent, extremely intelligent rabbi, and very diverse knowledge. And he once wrote to the Rebbe that he was working on 3 major projects. Each project is a full-time job for him. Each one on its own. And it's just too overwhelming. So he asked the Rebbe, which project should he focus on? Should he focus on project A, B, or C? That was his question. It's a question that maybe we all have in our lives at different times. And so the Rebbe answered him in a way which was which was no surprise for the Rebbe to answer, especially someone like Rabbi Steinsaltz. And he said, I give you a blessing of success on all 3 projects. Okay. Wow, that's so amazing. He's telling Rabbi Steinsaltz, just do it all, be greater than you can be. All right, it's very inspiring. But if you were Rabbi Steinsaltz, it wouldn't be very inspiring. No, I mean this in a serious way. But what do you do? I have a serious question. I have 3 things, and I can't do 3. We have to be practical. What should I do? So Rabbi Steinsaltz was trying to absorb the answer that the Rebbe gave him. He was trying to actually understand it, take this enormous light and find a vessel to comprehend it. And this is how he, with his scientific background, explained it beautifully. He said, this is really what the Rebbe was telling me. The Rebbe was telling me, the Rebbe believed, there's a scientific concept which I'm not familiar with, but that is if you take matter and you exert enormous pressure to the matter, like with hydraulic presses, they do tests of these things, and you exert enormous pressure to the matter, actually what science has discovered is that the very structure of the matter changes from the enormous pressure. And suddenly you can actually respond to a greater level of intensity or greater level of pressure. And suddenly it's a stronger vessel. It's almost like if you take a ceramic and you put it into a kiln, right? And suddenly after it experiences that heat, it conditions it to be able to sustain very difficult environments. Human beings are the exact same way. Maybe unfortunately, and maybe we can now say fortunately, in hindsight, we understand this because we know through our own experience how this happens. Rabbi Steinsaltz said the Rebbe believed that when you exert pressure upon yourself, you will begin to be able to produce in ways that you were never able to produce before. And he said the Rebbe actually tested this theory that he had. You know who he tested it on? On himself. And in fact, the Rebbe produced more than maybe any other man we know has produced. Point being, when we begin to create music out of the noise, when we begin to create harmony out of all of these different elements, we have low energy, high sustainability, but we bring all of these low energies together, suddenly what happens? Not only do we give a home, a receptacle, a vessel to all of these energies, but because they're working in a unified manner, we are now able to access these encompassing powerful, intense forms of energy which never had a home to go to. And now suddenly we can absorb them because we have become conditioned. We have conditioned ourselves to do that. This is the purpose of man. This is our purpose. And this is the reason why God created the world with a world of tohu, a world of chaos first, and then a world of tikkun, a world of rectification. God said, guess what, guys? It's your job to rectify. But when you rectify, you're going to find a home for the encompassing light, for this intense light. And when we do, we in fact bring the world to the point that it's supposed to be to, which of course is with the coming of Mashiach. So, Olam Katan, the small world, Zeh Ha'adam, this is man. We are a microcosm of the larger world. And so just like in the larger world there is the confusion and there's the rectification, we have in our lives a lot of confusion. I don't need to teach you about that too much. We have the ability to rectify, to bring it all together and to make sure every aspect of our life, the ice cream, the sleeping, the radio, the iPhone, all of it is all being used in harmony in a certain direction. And when we do that, what we're doing is we are using the art of turning our noise into music. This is our entire purpose. The question is, what is our music? What is our music? What music are we playing? When you have a gentleman come into the orchestra with a violin and he's a master violinist, that's fantastic. But if you're not going to tell him what piece of music to play, how's he going to know what to play? So let us talk about our music, the point of turning our noise into a symphony. Let's talk about a symphony. I want you to watch this piece. You may know who this Jewish conductor is, and although I'm going to in some way compare a conductor to God, I'm in no way saying that Leonard Bernstein he was a Jew, had a spark of God in him, but not God himself. Here it is. Did you see the joy, the excitement, the exuberance that was coming out of the conductor? He was having such satisfaction from the music, from the harmony that was created by all of the players. And you were able to see how each player was focused on their role, but each one of them was a part of a greater whole. That's what a symphony really is. And that's what our lives are actually supposed to be, because each one of us on our own is an orchestra. You know, there was a Jew that once came to the Baal Shem Tov, and he asked the Baal Shem Tov why it is that at the slightest provocation, Hasidim start dancing. I mean, if for no other reason, it's bad PR for the movement. You know, you guys look unstable. You're just jumping up and dancing and singing. You know, what is with this? So he said, let me tell you a story. He said that there was once a violinist that walks into a little shtetl in the center of town. He goes into the marketplace and he starts fiddling, you know. And there's someone there, you know, he's not used to this. He hears someone in the middle of the marketplace playing, and he listens to this guy. He's good. So he stands there and he's listening and enjoying the music. Another person hears another person. And suddenly, there's an entire crowd of people surrounding this violinist. And everyone's listening and they're swaying and they're moving their hands and they're dancing. And it sort of was sweeping everyone into the spirit of tremendous joy. He said at that moment, there was a gentleman who sadly was deaf. And he came and he looks and he sees this is a bunch of crazy people. What in the world are they jumping in the middle of the marketplace and moving in the most ridiculous ways? What's wrong? He turns to someone and says, what's wrong with these people? Why is everyone acting so silly in the middle of the marketplace? And so the gentleman said, well, there's someone here that's playing the violin, and when you can hear the music and how beautiful and exquisite it is, it just draws out a dance. And so the Baal Shem Tov said, you see, my Hasidim, whenever they look at anything in the world, whenever they look at any aspect of their life, what do they see? They see the music of God playing right through it. And when they hear that music, they can't control themselves. They just begin to dance. So he said, look, if someone's a little bit deaf and they don't hear the music, right? And they look at the person who hears music and thinks that they're ridiculous, is the guy going to stop dancing? This really is what life is all about. It's all about realizing the music and everything that's going on around us and actually bringing it all together. You know, one of the things that touches me so deeply about the leadership of the Rebbe is that every single element of life that he spoke about, every single human problem that he responded to, was always a response that came from the same perspective. It was always from a godly perspective. It's phenomenal. When you read the letters, the correspondence he had with other people, everything, there was such a music to the way he saw life. And a consistent, it was all playing the same piece of music in so many different ways, so many different pieces and instruments, but they're all playing the exact same music. And that's really what's is so phenomenal. You know, a woman, a gentleman wrote a letter to the Rebbe about that his wife was depressed and he didn't know what to do. And the Rebbe said, this was the Rebbe's response: I don't believe you'll ever get this response from a psychiatrist or a psychologist. With all due respect to them, but this is a perspective, and a perspective that the Rebbe believed and lived with, and therefore everything that came out of him just exuded this perspective. He said, tell your wife to imagine that she was standing in the presence of the King of all kings, right? To have that great honor. Would she then be depressed? No one would be depressed if they were standing in the presence of the King of all kings. If she envisions that, that will help her get out of her depression. And the Rebbe said she doesn't really need to envision it or imagine it, because this is truly the reality. Because at every moment we are in the presence of God, in the presence of the Almighty. That type of response comes from someone who is living with a consistency in every single aspect of their life. You know, a parent sends a letter to the Rebbe that they're having difficulty raising their daughter who is maybe a little bit rebellious or whatever it is. And the Rebbe gives them a piece of advice. The Torah, it says about the Torah, D'racheha darchei noam v'chol nesivaiseha shalom. That the ways of the Torah are pleasant, its paths are of peace. You should respond to her in a pleasant and peaceful manner, not in a harsh manner, just the way the Torah teaches us to, and you will suddenly begin to see that she's going to respond to you. Where did the Rebbe get his perspective from? From the exact same place. It was a godly perspective. This is what we call music in our lives. Hashem is our conductor. Hashem is our conductor. The Almighty is our conductor. And He gives every single one of us our own piece of music. And He gives us many different instruments that we are playing. But we have to play all of these instruments to the very same piece of music. And that piece of music is the unique contribution that we can give to the world through the talents and gifts that God has given us, following the directives of the Torah, and to fulfill the purpose that the Torah sets out for all of us as one, which is to make the world more authentic, more transparent to the reality of God. When we're doing that, we are playing our music, and we're bringing every element of our life into one force. You know, here's a blessing also that God gives us. God gives us, thank God, many years, hopefully up until 120, and God doesn't impose on us how we should play our music. God says, listen, I want you to produce your music, and I'm going to let you develop yourself to do it the way you know how to do it. In Philadelphia, we had... That's it. Okay, in Philadelphia, we had a great... Philadelphia, we had a great conductor in the Philadelphia Philharmonic Orchestra, an Italian conductor by the name of Riccardo Muti. Anyone ever hear of Riccardo Muti? Okay, and Riccardo Muti actually then went back to Italy, which wasn't a good idea for him, because when he got a letter from the 700 members of the orchestra there, all, signed by every single one of them, and the letter said, Dear Riccardo Muti, you are one of the most phenomenal and talented conductors in the whole world, and we all ask you in one voice, please resign. And the reason why they asked him to resign was because he was a conductor who imposed his music on his orchestra. This is the way you're going to play the music. But that's not what God does, and that's not what, if I may say this, with all due respect to Riccardo Muti, that's not what other great conductors do. They actually let every single person develop and play the music as it comes out of you, but following the music. You play this music, but play it as in the style that fits you. And that's actually what makes a beautiful orchestra flow. So the more we have music, the less conflict we have in our life. So much so that even our suffering or the challenges that God gives us becomes a part of the music itself. There isn't a single element of our life that it doesn't need to be a part of the music. So, you know, we all have heard of Michael Phelps, of course. You know what this is? This is a picture that Michael Phelps sent on Twitter of the room that he's been sleeping in for the last few months, which is a specially conditioned air-pressured room so that he can be conditioned for the Olympics. So he wanted to get his body used to a certain environment with a certain level of oxygen so that he would be able to perform on the highest level possible. Sleep was a part of everything in Michael Phelps' life dedicated to one cause, the music that he sings, which is swimming. Meaning that even our sleep, even what we eat, even how much time we spend talking to people is all a part of our music. And when we realize that, we pay close attention to everything that we're doing. How much time should I be sleeping every night? Should I be sleeping more? Should I be sleeping less? But you don't just sleep. I'm just sleeping in. What do you mean you're just sleeping in? Like you have 2 hours of your life to kill? Are you playing your music or not? How much sleep does your body need? And that's how we decide. What foods are going to make you more productive to be able to play your music? And then your eating becomes a part of your music. It's just another one of the instruments. That's a profound lesson over here. And here's something very interesting, which, you know, almost sounds un-Jewish maybe because maybe we're not as familiar or it's not as emphasized because this is so threatening. And that's three statements we're toward in Judaism. One is, B'chol drachecha da'ehu, in all your ways know Him. Hasidic philosophy speaks about this all the time. Know God in all of your ways. There is nothing in your life that shouldn't be a part of knowing God or expressing the reality of God. It's very radical. All your deeds should be for the sake of heaven. Everything you do should be for the sake of heaven. So what do you do when you read this? Well, yeah, it's a nice idea, and we do our best, and okay. No. God's saying, I want to give you a blessing. You want to live a miserable life? Get it all together. Turn it into a music. You're going to love it. Judaism isn't going to be a bore or a burden. You're going to embrace it because you're going to suddenly be waking up dancing and singing to a whole new tune. It's a whole different experience. I place God before me constantly. This is something many synagogues put up in front of the one who's leading the prayers. To remember to place God before you constantly. Imagine if we had this before us, literally, constantly, all of the time. Am I playing my music? Am I in unison with my conductor? So, Tanya actually tells us, the book of Tanya, written by the first Lubavitch Rebbe, Reb Shneir Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe, and he writes there something which many people are threatened by. He writes that every human being has three forms of expression: thought, speech, and action. And he explains how every single one of us needs to strive to make sure every thought, every speech, and every action we do is in a godly fashion. Now that's an overwhelming task to undertake. But what he tells us is that every person can achieve that, and we must strive to achieve it. So you may say maybe he's a little bit out of touch. The Alter Rebbe wasn't out of touch. The Alter Rebbe believed in every single one of us. He said, stop with the excuses. Let us realize what it is that God has given us the ability to achieve. Let's be real. Let's face ourselves. Let's not minimize ourselves. Let's grow ourselves to who we really are. You see, so much of our fear is the fear of our very greatness. I am scared to live up to who I am because of all of the responsibility and pressure that may put on me. So what do? We minimize ourselves. Well, there's only so much you can do. I'm only human, etc., etc. The Alter Rebbe wanted to bring out the best of us, and so I want to conclude with the point of the fear of losing ourselves. And we're going to do this even though I'm getting warnings now, but we're going to try and finish this. Turn to the person sitting next to you and describe why one might be gripped with a fear from this message, that your entire life, every deed should be for God. This is a very important exercise, though, to do, because a lot of times we're in denial of how scared we are of this message. We don't want to be overtaken by... Why don't most people become Olympic athletes? I wouldn't want to spend, I know it's 10 years of my life. All I do all day is swimming, and everything I eat is all about my swimming, and everything I sleep is all about my swimming. Everything is swimming, swimming, swimming. Please, I want to have a life. Isn't that what we say? I want to have a life. We want to be well balanced. Right? But actually, when we make every part of our life focused on one thing, we actually become very well balanced in a unique way. Because we suddenly have enormous power and complete and accomplishment of who it is that we were meant to be and the gift that we can give to the world. And making the world otherwise we're scared, we spend some time in the cafe, we're full of distractions. We're full of distractions. That's really what it is. Let me give you an example. One quick example. I was once rollerblading, and I was going down a hill, and I was actually a little bit scared as I was going down the hill. And so what did I do? I made myself fall because I was scared I was going to pick up more speed and really hurt myself, right? I had fear, and therefore I stopped myself. When we have fear, we stop ourselves from moving forward. I think there's some fear here. Maybe. Right? So I think we all have fear, and that fear stops us, and we cannot let our fear stop us. So we have to become one. Someone who excels in something becomes one. A good musician becomes one with their instrument. You know that? A singer becomes one with the music that they are singing. Someone who's on a Broadway show becomes one with their part. We have to become one with our role as a Jew in this world. And when we become one, there's no longer a disharmony. It just flows out of us. It just comes right out of us. So I'm going to conclude with the last story, and that is the story of Yaakov Chazan. Yaakov Chazan was a Polish Jew, and he used to work for a Polish landlord, and he used to see his landlord stick his ear to the ground every once in a while, and he would listen, and then he would start to move his body in a rhythm. So Yaakov Chazan saw that the ground actually played some form of music. So he was digging his ear into the ground. He didn't hear anything. And his Polish landowner looks at him and starts laughing. So Yaakov says, why don't I hear the music? He says, Yaakov, this isn't your land. You're a Jew. That's why you don't hear the music. If you were a Pole, you would hear the music. This is my land, that's why I hear the music. Yaakov Chazan became one of the first pioneers in the land of Israel. And he said, I was waiting to be able to get to my land. And I came to the land of Israel because I knew this is my land and this is where I'm going to hear my music. And the first thing he did when he came to the land was he put his ear to the ground, and suddenly he started moving to the very rhythm. He started to dance to it. He started to sing to it. He started to be inspired by it. Because he said, this is my land, and now I can hear the music. And when I listen for a while to the music of the land and let myself enter into its rhythms, my soul soars and my spirit rises, and I know that I am home. We are in fear of becoming one with the Jew who we are and making every facet of our life part of that. When we make it one with ourselves, it just is a natural life that we begin to live, and we suddenly plug into our own music. Every aspect of our life sways to those rhythms, and we make the world a rectified place. Thank you.